Good morning, everyone, and a good morning it is. I feel so exhilarated about the legislation that has been introduced on behalf of the American people. I want to congratulate Congressman John Sarbanes for developing this legislation, the Government by the People Act. Doesn't that sound wonderful? I want to so pleased to be here with John Larson. He's really been the shepherd of this whole effort of campaign reform, all the elements of our dare over the years. And thank you, John Larson, for your great leadership in this regard. We're all in your debt. And I'm pleased to be here. Mr. Sarbanes will announce the number of co-sponsors on his legislation, but I'm honored to be here with the leadership of the Progressive Caucus, Congressman Keith Ellison, whom we'll be hearing from, a champion of a campaign reform in her home state of Maine and in the Congress and in the country, Congresswoman Shelley Pingree, a representative of the freshman class, and again, effective from the start on this issue, Congressman Beto O'Rourke from Texas. We're delighted that Annie Custer of New Hampshire is with us as well. Annie, up there, with the folks. And a person who has been a steady hand on all of this for a very long time, John Yarmouth of Kentucky. 4 years ago, in January, the Citizens United decision of the Supreme Court shook the very foundations of our democracy. The principle that in the United States of America, it is the voices of the people, we believe, that's our foundation, that is the voices of the people that determine the outcome of elections, not the bank accounts of the privileged few. They reversed that. Since that decision would open the floodgates to millions and millions of dollars of secret spending on elections, we have seen how the tidal wave of unlimited, unidentified money has distorted our electoral process. It has suffocated the airwaves, undisclosed, secret, special interest money, suffocating the airwaves, a deterrent to voter participation. And now we have seen how the special interests have work to drown out, the special interest to drown out the public interest. And so I've issued a dare. Many of you have heard it over and over again. We must disclose, Chris Van Hollen has been a leader on this, disclose the sources of the money in our campaigns. We must amend the Constitution to reverse the grievous error of Citizens United decision. We must reverse that decision. DAR, we must reform our broken campaign finance system, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And we must D, disclose, A, amend, reform, and E, empower citizens everywhere to exercise their right to vote. Today, we are proud to be announcing the introduction of the reform part of that DARE, the Government by the People Act. In doing so, we honor the vows of our founders. They were willing to sacrifice their lives, their liberty, their sacred honor for a democracy, a government of the many, not a government of the money. In passing this legislation, we can restore confidence in the democracy and honor the vows of our founders. And now it is my privilege to yield to the distinguished gentleman from Maryland who has been relentless, persistent, dissatisfied, just endlessly hardworking and smart thinking about honoring the vows of our founders, John Sarbanes.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader Pelosi, for making reform a priority and for understanding that we do need a government, in your words, of the many, not the money. The Government by the People Act is our collective commitment to empower everyday citizens out there to take their government back from the special interests and the big money. That's what this is all about. I want to thank John Larson, who headed up the task force on election reform, continues to do that. His terrific work brought us together over the last year, allowed a lot of different voices to come into this process, and we have a very strong and robust piece of legislation as a result. And I also want to do a shout out to John Yarmouth for his terrific work on the task force. I want to thank the dozens of our colleagues who over the last really 2 years as we were putting this bill together shared their perspectives on it based on what they were hearing in their districts and based on really this sense of dissatisfaction on the part of many out there in the public, and they added their voice and they made this bill stronger and more robust. And I want to thank this amazing coalition, really an unprecedented coalition of reformers that has come together. Many of them are standing here behind us, and they've made this happen. Very quickly, Americans for Campaign Reform, Common Cause, CWA, DEMOS, NAACP, the NEA, PCCC, PIRG, Public Campaign, Public Citizens, Sierra Club, and many, many more who've stepped up and have created this broad coalition that I think is going to be the difference this time in terms of getting this kind of legislation passed ultimately. It's pretty easy to describe the problem. Whether you're talking about health care or education or protecting our environment or the all-important goal of creating jobs, Americans want to see Congress putting their priorities first. But the problem is that big money gets in the way. You look at the oil and gas industry, you look at Wall Street and the finance industry, you look at the billionaires who are behind these super PACs, and their money is pouring into political campaigns. It's pouring into lobbying shops. And the result of this, the effect, the predictable effect of this is when you go to make policy, when Congress goes to make policy, all too often, Congress ends up leaning in the direction of those interests and often away from the interests, the concerns, the priorities of everyday Americans. So it's no wonder that people are angry. It's no wonder that people are fed up out there, and they have this sense of distrust about Washington and Congress. That's what we need to address. And we think we've done that with this bill. We think that the Government by the People Act is a meaningful attempt to address the frustration people feel, to give people their voices back. That's the purpose of it, to create a government, a system, a politics, a democracy that really is of, by, and for the people. It does a couple of very concrete things to reach out to everyday citizens. First, it establishes what we're calling the My Voice tax credit, which is to enable everyday citizens out there to really participate again in their government, to feel empowered to do that, to make it easier for them to join in the solution. Secondly, we established something called the Freedom from Influence Matching Fund that can then come in behind those small contributions, boost them up, and amplify the voice of the grassroots so people truly feel empowered. The goal here, and I think our solution provides this, is to make the voice of everyday citizens as powerful as the voices of the big donors out there. I'm going to finish with a real brief story, which I think drives this home. A couple of years ago, a supporter of mine pulled me aside at a house party, and he said, I voted for you. I've knocked on doors. I've done mailings. I've stuffed envelopes. I've made phone calls. He said, but I want to do more. He said, I'd like to make a contribution of $25 to your campaign. He said, that's all I can afford, but I'd like to do it. I'd be happy to do it. But he was a little bit sort of hesitant, and as we talked, and he mentioned to me that he'd never actually been asked to make that donation. As we talked, I realized that there was something nagging at him. And what it was is he was wondering, does my $25 really matter? Does it make a difference? Is there any way my $25 can actually compete against the big money out there? The Government by the People Act is an attempt to say to that individual, and I think millions like him across the country who are feeling left out, to say to him, yeah, your voice does count. Your voice matters. Your voice makes a difference. Your voice will be at the center of a new system that we can create. So that's the promise of this legislation, to get us back on the road, to begin this journey back to a system, a politics, a democracy, a government that truly is of, by, and for the people. Now, it's my pleasure, it's my real pleasure to introduce someone who's been in this reform space for a long time. He's been a leader, not just as chair of the Task Force on Election Reform, which has really become a clearinghouse for us to look at these critical issues that can empower Americans across the country. But he's been a leader on this kind of reform for years before that. And he's been a leader here in the House of Representatives. It's my pleasure to introduce John Larson. John?
Well, thank you, John, and congratulations to you. There's an old saying that without vision, there can be no victory. We are blessed in the Democratic caucus, and I dare say the people all across this great country are blessed that we have a leader who has incredible vision. Not only does she have incredible vision, but she has the most unbelievable work ethic of anybody I've ever met in public life. No is never an acceptable answer with her. And the impossible is always within our reach. But most importantly, as she attributed so many kind words, and rightfully so, to John Sarbanes, I often say of Nancy Pelosi, she never asks any member of her caucus what she hasn't done tenfold. This is an issue that she has cared deeply about. This is something where she has established a task force, but long before the task force. Individually in legislation that she has worked on with Sam Gagenson and Dave Obey and John Tierney over the years, and David Price, and I could go on, and all the people behind me and in the audience are nodding your heads because you know of that. Why our colleagues deeply appreciate her is because she also engages, yeah, I know, us on every level. And that level is an embracing of the vitality of ideas that this caucus can bring. Every year we get an infusion of new members that bring that same kind of vitality. Every single year, whether it's at our issues conference or whether it's in the caucus, our leader, this visionary, makes sure that we are engaged in that vitality in a way that we can come together. And we have. We have brought together people from the outside and from within our caucus, focused on a great piece of legislation that competed in the vitality of ideas within a caucus and outside of it, that engages people in a way that we want to return the government of, by, and for the people back to its rightful place. Because it's time to return government of, by, and for the people, not a government bought and paid for by billionaires, ideologues, and special interests. John Sarbanes has done that. He deserves an enormous amount of credit. His persistency, his traveling around the country, as do our other colleagues that are standing here with us, John Yarmouth and Shelley Pingree, who John has worked with very closely, David Price, who's not here, and a host of other members. The leader has put forward a task force. And as she said, today we're here to talk about election reform and getting money out of politics and returning it to the grassroots. But her vision goes beyond that, as she's indicated as well. It's about making sure that we have full disclosure, where Chris Van Hollen is leading the way. It's making sure that we amend the Constitution, where Donna Edwards and Ted Deutsch and Marcy Kaptur are all playing key roles. It's also making sure that we empower, through our Voting Rights Act, and our caucus is legendary in this respect. We're so proud of the efforts by Mr. Conyers that are going on in that respect, as well as Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, the legendary John Lewis, Bobby Scott, and Jerry Nadler. I could go on and on and on. What this leader has done has engaged this caucus. What John Sarbanes has done and the other members around here is engaged the American people. We're grateful for the long-standing help that we've had of so many of our participants behind us. We're so proud that we are joined here together to get behind this piece of legislation. Nobody does that better than the leader of our progressive caucus, the gentleman from Minnesota, Keith Ellison.
Let me join in thanking everybody, starting with Leader Pelosi and all the members and all the organizational leaders. But, you know, President Obama recently said that income inequality was the defining issue of our time. And he was right to say so. And income inequality, for some, looks like stagnant pay, looks like mounting debt, and for others, looks like more money than you can possibly imagine coming in faster than you can count it. Now, you might think, well, this is just a matter of what you can buy, what you can't buy, and the difficulty of making it through this economy. But this income inequality actually plays itself out in a political context. The economic inequality causes a political inequality because the dollars go to buy political influence in a various numbers of ways. This has had a corrosive effect on our democracy, which I believe is an existential threat to who we are as a people, which is a land of opportunity, which is people who climb a ladder, which is where work actually should pay, and where birth shouldn't matter that much into how your quality of life turns out. And if you have any doubt about it, let me just give you a few factoids that my staff pulled up for me. 2012, 70% of all PAC money came from 163 people. I bet you there's not 160. I bet you 163 people are about our number in this room right now. 70% of all PAC money. In the last presidential election, it was estimated that over $213 million was given to the campaigns from secret donors. We don't even know if they're Americans. We don't know who they are at all. And in the last month of the election, super PACs, dark money groups, and other outside lobbying groups spent $500 million. Now, I have more facts, but I just want to share this one because it's the one that punches me in the stomach. And that is, according to the smart folks, the professors who study this stuff, the preferences of the people at the bottom third of the income distribution have no apparent impact on the behavior of their elected officials when you look at it statistically. So let me just say it again. People at the bottom third of the income, their political preferences, their preferences don't matter to their elected officials from the standpoint of an academic who studied this issue. So you wonder, why can't we get any action on long-term unemployment insurance? What about raising the minimum wage? What about paid sick? What about these things going to help people who really work every single day? Why can't their preferences get a hearing? Because our economic system is screwed up, which is why I'm so proud to be part of this effort today of Government by the People Act. And I'm going to tell you this as I wrap up. As awesome as Leader Pelosi is and as awesome all these members are, we need your help. Am I right about that, Madam Leader? We need your help. We can't happen without your help.
Go ahead now.
We need you. We need you. We need you to carry this message to every inch of the United States, to every hair shop, every barber shop, every church, mosque, synagogue, anywhere the people are gathering. We absolutely need your help because this thing is popular and we will win if we have grit and determination and don't back down. And let me tell you about not backing down. Shelley Pingree don't back down. Shelley Pingree doesn't back down when she was the CEO of Common Cause, and she's not going to back down now. Let me bring forward my colleague, Shelley Pingree.
Well, thank you very much, Keith. Thank you to all my colleagues today. It's a big honor to be here with everyone. I want to echo a few of these remarks without re-saying everything that everyone said, but first to Leader Pelosi. You know, often when you work on these bills on reform, it's very challenging for members of leadership to be able to say we're ready to make changes. These are the people we count on to make sure they bring in a lot of new colleagues and keep our message out there and active. So the fact that Leader Pelosi has been ahead of these issues as the Speaker in so many positions for so many years along the way, encouraging all of us to get out there, encouraging the caucus to move forward with this is an enormous statement, and I appreciate that very, very much. I won't mention everybody, but to Representative Sarbanes, who has toiled on this bill for a very long time, and I know firsthand how difficult it is to work through all of the details, all of the complications of very, very complicated legislation, bringing together a lot of people. This is a great day, and thank you very much for all your hard work. And I appreciate all my colleagues up here, but I just want to say another thank you to Mr. Larson, his silver tongue, his wonderful way of bringing together the caucus around this issue and his steadfast support of this issue, bringing everybody in the best way possible and making sure we move forward on this. So thank you very much. Everyone else standing up here has also been an important assistance, but I want to recognize the people behind us and the people in front of us and all of the activist groups who have come together today from labor, from the environmental organizations, from the reform organizations, and from people who deeply care about this issue, see the effect of money in politics on many of the decisions that we make, but in particular from many of the groups that have worked on this issue for decades, longer than any of us could have stomached to work on some of these huge challenges, only watching every day as they get more complicated and more difficult. So I can't say how much I appreciate all of you coming together. That's never easy, but coming together behind a bill like this is extremely important. So thank you. Thank you. I just want to add one thing. My colleagues have said so many important things, but one issue I just want to bring up briefly. I'm lucky enough to come from the great state of Maine, where we have publicly financed elections, as they do in Connecticut and a variety of ways in a few other states around this country. It was a revolutionary act in our state. It was decided by the voters, who, as you know, have had it with elected officials even more so today than they did when they passed the legislation in Maine. But what's really important is this has changed the face of the people who get to run for office. The majority of members who run for the state legislature run under public financing. It's opened the door to people who didn't have the list, who didn't have connections, who had no way to go out and raise that money, and who were able to say, I'm going to bring together my constituents, I'm going to do the things that we all want to do in campaigns, and I'm going to go ahead and do this. And I can tell you, Republicans and Democrats use it in my state. It's not an ideological divide. The citizens support it. They love this idea that money doesn't have as much influence on politics. And while we haven't fixed everything in Maine or any other state around this country, I am very excited that we are back to talking about the opportunities at a federal level so that all of my colleagues can share in doing this again. I'll just share one last little story that many of you have heard before, but I think it's safe to say that any of my colleagues, while they might speak of an ideological divide about how we go along doing about this, any of my colleagues would say that they would prefer to run for office without being tied to the telephones, to the fundraisers, to all the events, to keep spending time raising money. The truth is, it is hard to get here today without devoting much of your time to doing nothing but raising money. Whether it has an influence on you or not, it takes up your time in being able to do this. I first ran for federal office in 2002 when I was expected to raise millions of dollars. Not as many millions as people often have to today, but a lot for the state of Maine. I spent sometimes 10 or more hours on the phone in almost a 2-year-long campaign calling up people that I knew and people that I didn't know and just saying, will you support me in this effort? It sounds like a nice thing, but after a while, you're saying, wait a minute, I wanted to be out and meet the voters. I wanted to shake hands. I wanted to be doing a whole bunch of other things that I didn't have time to do, as so many candidates and incumbents don't have time to do because your time is taken up by raising money. Paradoxically, my daughter was running for the state legislature at the same time while public financing had just begun in the state of Maine. Now, my daughter Hannah loves to remind me that she was allowed to go to the many communities in her House district, shake hands, have town meetings, run under public financing, get enough money to run her campaign for the signs and the brochures and everything she had to send out, but she got to spend her time talking to the voters, meeting with people. Isn't that what democracy is supposed to be about? Isn't that how we want democracy to work today? So I'll just close with the fact that I was lucky enough to win my office in 2008. But in that campaign in 2002, I didn't make it all the way, in spite of the money that I raised, in spite of the time I spent on the phone. But my daughter won. And she never lets me forget that today. And public financing has continued on in our state, and I hope that we can bring that to all of my colleagues who will consider it a great day when they are freed from the chores of raising money constantly and can just meet with the voters and run a democracy. So thank you, everybody, for your hard work on this. My most important job is introducing Representative O'Rourke. Thank you very much. One of our newer members who can talk firsthand about some of these challenges and why members across the board, members who've been here for a long time, and our brand new members are saying we got to have a change. So thank you very much for being here.
I want to start by also commending and thanking Leader Pelosi for her leadership on this issue. And I think it's indicative of her leadership style that she's included a freshman in this. She's gone to great lengths to make sure that the new members of this caucus have a chance to be involved on the critical issues before the Congress. And for me, this is one of the, if not the most critical issues before us. And I'd also like to say, in regards to Congressman Sarbanes, not only does he have the ideas and the vision and the tenacity that all of us have talked about, he's also proved the concept in his district, and he's bypassed big dollar donors, PAC donations, to show that when you go directly to the people through every precinct in his congressional district and seek out those small dollar donations and that grassroots support, you can really make a difference, not just in terms of the participation in your district, but you can strengthen your credibility and viability as a candidate, which he has certainly done. I did something a little bit similar in my district in El Paso, Texas, but it was born not out of virtue, but out of necessity. I was challenging an incumbent member of Congress, and in order to somewhat level the playing field, we had to seek out small dollar contributors. No person in their right mind was going to give money to a challenger, to an incumbent already in Congress. So we went to the doors, knocked on over 16,000 doors, solicited contributions, $5, $25, $100, to the point that we raised more in small dollar contributions than any other House candidate in the state of Texas. So in our own way in that race, we were able to also prove the concept again because we had to. That was the only way that we would have a chance to successfully compete, but that shouldn't be the exception. And we should ensure that there is a level playing field for incumbent members of Congress, but also those who want to challenge and inject new ideas, new backgrounds, new experiences to this body, and make sure that we are truly reflecting the American people. So it was incredibly gratifying to get here, to meet Congressman Larson, to meet Congressman Sarbanes, and the other members who are up here, and find that there was a motivated group of members of Congress who didn't like the status quo. And again, I think it says something about our leader that both Democrats and Republicans have benefited from the status quo. And for a sitting member of Congress, and especially for someone in leadership to champion a change to that, and with change comes uncertainty, and with change comes disruption, is really saying something. I think that's going to renew the faith in the American public in this institution. And I think in terms of my own district, as the other freshman members are, the images of those town hall meetings, of those debates, of meeting with a constituent at their doorstep and hearing the cynicism, hearing how they feel that Congress no longer represents their interests. I think that helps explain why I, Annie Custer, and more than half of the freshman Democrats are original co-sponsors of this bill. We're fresh from the field, fresh from our districts, and I hope that we can help compel other members, more senior members, to join this great group that started off on this reform agenda. So I want to thank Congressman Sarbanes, the leader, again, for their leadership on this, and everyone, civic and otherwise, who's involved in making sure that we get some true reform in Congress. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the leader. Thanks.
Thank you, all of my colleagues, for your commitment to honoring the vows of our founders. Early this morning, I was soaring with the eagles. That's what we call when you go to a 7:30 breakfast to talk about issues. I was soaring with the UAW, and I said, you know, Walter Reuther once said, you cannot sell, the bread box and the ballot box cannot be separated.
That's right.
That what happens at the ballot box has an impact on the lives of people. And that's attesting to what you said, my colleague, Mr. Ellison, but also to the fact that people's confidence, as Mr. Sarbanes said, is shaken by what they see now, and their confidence in our democracy is essential. So again, you can't do it just by inside maneuvering. The outside mobilization is absolutely essential to success. So thank you to the groups that are here, the individuals who are on board, for what you are doing to spread the word, to cause a drumbeat across America. And John Sarbanes, John Larson, all the others who are here, they're our Paul Reveres. Because of their courage, their getting out there, the fate of the nation is riding on them. So you've got to help them whip that horse and get this get this job done, our Paul reveals. Because I do believe that the nation, as our founders courageously established it, the tradition that we have had in our country is greatly eroded, corroded, whatever the word is, by what the Supreme Court did.
Right.
We can counter that with the government of the people, by the People Act. Thank you, John Sarbanes.